All right. It's not ESPN's 30 for 30. However, it is my 98 for 98. The 98 seasons in the history of the New York Football Giants. I'm going to try to get it done in 98 days. Probably not going to get it done in 98 days. However, I'm going to try to get it done before the beginning of the regular season, which starts September 10th against the Dallas Cowboys. And I think I should be able to get that done. And we're forging ahead. We made it to the 1970s. Woo! The 46th season in the history of the New York Giants. 46th season in the history of the New York Giants. 51st season in the history of the NFL. The NFL started in 1920. Giants started in 1925. So the Giants are 5 years younger than the NFL is. Now, this season here is special, near, and dear to my heart. This is my absolute favorite season of all time. Why? Well, because this is the first season I actually remember watching the New York Giants. Remembering, I mean, I'm sure my dad had football and baseball and stuff on a lot. So was I actually in the room when like a game was on in 1968? Probably. Or when a game was on in 1969? Probably, but I remember this, and the reason why I remember it was because we were at it was week 13, no bye week, so week 13 was game 13. The Giants were playing in St. Louis, and I was at my grandparents' house. I was living on Long Island. We lived in Wisconsin. We went to my grandparents' house, who were in Franklin Square, which was close to the city. And it was toward the end of the game. And I was sitting there watching the game, just watching it, and nothing really stood out to me at all. But and I guess maybe it was when Pete Gogolak kicked the field goal with a minute and a half to go or so, whatever, and put the Giants up by 17 points, which was like 3 scores. I remember like my dad getting like really excited, and my grandfather, I knew maybe he was clapping or something like that. And they were all excited. I'm like, what's going on? This must be pretty big. And they were talking to each other or something like that. And they said something, if they win next week, they make the playoffs. And maybe they said that for the first time since, and it would have been since 1963. But I remember them saying that. One of them, I don't remember if it was my grandfather or my dad or something, but they were saying it back and forth. They said, if they win next week, they go to the playoffs. And, I said, especially when you're, my grandfather or my father grew up watching, maybe not watching the Giants in the 40s, because I don't know when they got a TV, but, in the 40s, the Giants, my dad was born in 39. That year, the Giants actually went to the championship game. 39, they were, but so he was used to the Giants going to championship games. 41, 44, 46, 56, 58, 59, 61, 62, 60. He's used to the playoffs and championship games and all this stuff. So you go from 1964 to 1970, there's no playoffs or anything. That's a long dry spell for the Giants. So same thing with my grandfather. My grandfather was alive, in 1925 when the Giants came into existence. So, they were both Giant fans, and that's what stuck in my head. That's why I actually remember that game. And unfortunately, it was not. Well, the Giants they beat the Cardinals. And it was 34-17. So they pushed their record to 9-4. So if they won the following week, I actually didn't even have to win the following week. If they lost the following week against the Rams, which they did, and if the Cowboys lost, which they didn't, well, I mean, the thing was the Giants had to play the Rams, who were a very good team, and the Cowboys had to play the Houston Oilers, who stunk. But anyway, the Giants took care of business at Yankee Stadium the following week. The Giants would have won the division and gone to the playoffs. They would have hosted a playoff game. They would have played the Lions, quite possibly, and anything would happen. You don't know. But the 1970 season for the Giants, I mean, it was a kind of like maybe like a perfect kind of storm for a team to actually go 9-4, and they lost the last game of the season and just missed the playoffs 9-5. I mean, there was no phenomenal player on except for Fran Tarkenton. I mean, the Giants they made a trade in the 1970s before the season. They traded Homer Jones to the Browns, and in return they got Jim Kinnicky, defensive tackle, and who played 2 seasons for the Giants. But then they got Ron Johnson, who wound up being a phenomenal player for the Giants, and they started getting injured and all. But he played for the Giants from 70 to 75. In those 6 seasons, he had 2,000-yard seasons. 1973, he had over 900 yards, and he missed 2 games. So he really, really, great player. But it was kind of like a perfect storm for the Giants because everything kind of came together that one season, especially for them to go 9-4 before they lost their last game. I mean, everything kind of, the teams they played outside, because this was the first year of the merger too. The 1970 was the AFL NFL merger. So the Giants played 3 teams from the AFC. All of those teams had horrible records. One of them was the Jets. Joe Namath was injured, so they went up against the Jets' backup quarterback. The Jets won 4 games all season. Let me see. I mean, they had to play. All right, here we go. They played the Bills. They played the Boston Patriots. 1971, the Boston Patriots changed their name to the New England Patriots. But the Giants had to play the Bills, who won 3 games all year. The Bills were 3-10-1. The Giants had to play the Jets, who were 4-10, and have played most of the season with Al Woodall, I believe, who was their backup quarterback because Joe Namath got injured. Then they had to play the Boston Patriots, who were 2-12. The Giants also had to play the New Orleans Saints, who were 2-11-1. The Giants also had 2 games against the Philadelphia Eagles, who were 3-10-1. So, I mean, they played some really, really weak. They also played the Chicago Bears the first game of the season on Saturday night at Yankee Stadium, and the Bears were 6-8. So they played they played 2 games against the Washington Redskins, who were 6-8. The only team that they played outside of the division who had a winning record was the Los Angeles Rams. They finished the season 9-4-1. The Giants played 4 games. They played 10 games. I'm sorry. They played 14 games. 10 of the games were against teams with losing records. Obviously 4 were with the winning records. 2 were against the Cowboys. 2 were against the Cardinals. And oddly enough, pretty much almost the whole season, the Giants and the Cowboys were chasing the Cardinals, who really started off very well, and they faltered at the end. The Cardinals had the lead in the division for quite some time, but they faltered at the end, and they wound up with a record of 8-5-1. Now, what the Cardinals, they lost like the last 3 games, or what did they do? Yeah, they lost the last 3 games. Yeah, so they were 8-2-1 and in first place. Then they lost at Detroit, they lost to the Giants, and they lost at Washington, 28-27. So I mean, the Cardinals had a very good season. They just faltered at the end there. The Cowboys came on, and the Cowboys finished strong. That's why they wound up winning the division 10-4-0. But I mean, it was just kind of like a perfect storm for the Giants in 1970. I mean, when they played the as I said, the Jets at Shea Stadium, it was with the Jets had a backup quarterback. They won 22-10. Early on, was it week 4? I can tell you, week 4, week 5. What was it? Then when they played the Boston Patriots. We have their scare. Is that it? No, there you go. Week 5. They played the Boston Patriots. They beat the Patriots 16-0. Joe Kapp was their quarterback. He came over from Minnesota. He played one more season. He played with the Boston Patriots. He had, I believe, 4 touchdown passes and 18 interceptions. What a horrible season. Then they played the Buffalo Bills at home. They won 20-6. The Buffalo Bills, I said, were not a very good team at all. I said the thing that they started off, the Giants started off 0-3. They lost the first game of the season against the Chicago Bears, 24-16. Then they went on the road and they played the Dallas Cowboys, and they were winning that game at halftime. And then they wound up the Cowboys wound up blowing them out 28-10. Then the following week, there was a blown call and two special teams plays that all between the three of them, if you take one of them out or whatever, the Giants possibly go to the playoffs. Let me explain. In week 3, the Giants were winning against the New Orleans Saints. Remember, the Saints only won 2 games all year. So it was week 3. The Saints beat the Giants for win number 1. Later on in the season, in week, I guess it was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In week 8, they beat the Detroit Lions at home. How? Well, the kicker Dempsey kicked an NFL record at the time, 63-yard field goal as time expired to beat the Detroit Lions 19-17. Those are the only 2 wins the Saints had all year. So the Giants were playing the Saints week 3 in New Orleans. Giants were winning 10-7. I guess it might have been the fourth quarter. I can check. I can see. Let's see when the Saints scored their second touchdown here. Was it the fourth quarter or the third quarter? Yep, fourth quarter. The Giants kicker, Bill Johnson, he played punter. He played 1 season. He played actually 11 games in the NFL. Didn't play before in the NFL. Didn't play after. He played 1 season. I don't know where they got him from or whatever, but this was it for him. 1 season. Well, he was punting in the fourth quarter. The Saints really couldn't move the ball, so the Giants had a 10-7 lead at halftime, and there was pretty much no scoring in the second half except for this block punt. Well, Johnson gets the ball and he goes to punt, and the Saints sent the max punt block, and by the time Johnson gets ready to punt the ball, there's like 315 New Orleans Saints back there blocking the ball. I mean, I couldn't count. If you ever look at the highlights, there's like, I can't even count that high. However, I don't know if the Giants just decided maybe not to block anybody. I don't know. It was absolutely horrible. Well, anyway, he blocked the punt, and as he blocked the punt got blocked. I was running the Giants 15-yard line. So he starts looking around for the ball, and inadvertently he winds up kicking the ball towards his own goal line. So by the time Al Dodd from the Saints picks the ball up as he's around the Giants 2-yard line, he kind of falls into the end zone for a touchdown. Now the Saints are up 14-10. So the block punt cost the Giants the game. Well, that wasn't the pièce de résistance. With about 3 minutes to go, the Giants drive down to the Saints 5-yard line. It's third down. And the Giants didn't score on the third down play, so they went for it on fourth down instead of trying to kick a field goal, maybe making it 14-13, kicking the ball to the Saints, and maybe holding them and try to kick a late field goal maybe to win. The Giants went for it on fourth down, and Fran Tarkenton winds up throwing an interception. But anyway, on third down, Fran Tarkenton drops back the pass. He rolls out to his left. He hits Aaron Thomas with a pass. Now, Aaron Thomas, if you ever look on YouTube videos, type in Giants at Saints 1970. It's like a 4-minute long video. Go to like about 3 minutes and 30 seconds or so, whatever. They'll show you Aaron Thomas catches the ball, gets his feet inbound, slides out of bounds, and the ref's standing there, and it goes like this. Blown call. The way they had in the end zone, they had like it was the markings. They had like the Saints. It was like a rectangle inside of the end zones. They had a rectangle, but it wasn't the whole end zone wasn't covered. they left like a strip around the outside of the inside of the markings. If you ever look at the video, you'll see what I'm talking about. So the referee thought that his feet were actually outside. They thought they were out of bounds. It's a blown call. You got to look at it. But after that, the way they had the end zone marked, with for the coloring of it, they disallowed that after that. So they blew the call. The Giants should have won that one 17-14. The ref blew the call. That's a loss the Giants should not have had. So anyway, the other one wound up being when the Giants played their first Monday night game of the season. Well, shall I say the first Monday night game ever. They played only one Monday night game that season, but it's their first Monday night game ever. It was in November. It was in Philadelphia. Monday night, November 23rd. Franklin Field. It was the last play of the first quarter. Once again, Bill Johnson's back there to punt. The Giants had the ball, I guess, around a 15-yard line or so. Johnson's back there around like his 5 or 4-3 or so, whatever it was. It's a high snap, so he's got to jump up to get it. So by the time he comes down, it's like a fumble. He winds up scooping up the ball, right? But as soon as he scoops it up, there's an Eagle there who knocks the ball out of his hand, and then there's a battle for it. Well, the Eagles wind up getting it at the 2-yard line. So they change quarters. So now the Eagles are at the other end of the field, because it was the first quarter. The quarter end is now at the other end of the field. So 2 plays later, Norm Snead sneaks it in for a touchdown. They blocked the extra point, but still the bad snap. It was a high snap. Bill Johnson, if you ever look at the replay, the highlights or whatever, he has to jump up. It's a bad snap. If he caught the ball, it got snapped to him normally, and he punted the ball away, it's not blocked. But the only reason why they had the problem is because the snap was so high, he had to jump up, and he had a hard time catching it. And so a bad play right there cost the Giants 6 points. Well, they wound up losing that Monday night game to the Eagles 23-20. Now, that was the first quarter mishap. Now, I mean, could things have changed, throughout the game? Yeah, I guess. But I mean, the Giants, the 6 points right there, basically they gave the Eagles, and they wound up losing 23-20. 2 bad special teams plays and a blown call quite possibly cost the Giants a trip to go to the playoffs. Now, the thing is that, the Cowboys wind up making it to the Super Bowl that year. The Giants beat the Cowboys, one time. They lost to them once, but they also beat them once. So the Giants, had a decent team. But as I said, it was like a perfect storm because they also played a lot of weaker opponents, too. The Giants started off 0-3. They went from 0-3. They won 9 of their next 10 games to go 9-4. And I said the last game of the season against the Rams, they wound up losing 31-3. The Giants actually had the lead in the game. Pete Gogolak kicked the field goal early on to put the Giants up 3-0. And I'll never forget that too, because I saw the game on TV. We were watching it, and I saw the field goal. Pete Gogolak kicked it was like a 40-yard field goal or so. It just made it over the crossbar. Giants are up 3-0. And then we left. We left to go to my aunt's house, who lived by the New Hyde Park, which is close to the city as well, too. So by the time we got there, I asked my father like a little while later. I said, "Dad, what was the score of the game?" And I thought the Giants were up 3-0, right? They were, they were going to win, right? Because it's the Giants. Yeah, we got this. Yeah, My dad said, "Yeah, they lost 31-3." I'm like, "What? Huh?" Yeah. Yeah. So then of course you couple that with the Giants' loss and the fact that the Cowboys wind up winning 52-10. They beat the Houston Oilers. They knocked the Giants out of the playoffs. So the Giants finished with a record of 9-5, but they were 9-4. Actually, as I said, they started 0-3. They won 9 of the next 10 games, which I'll go over, and they were 9-4 at one point. So one win at the end of the season, and they would have made the playoffs. And that today, there's still that game still haunts me. Those highlights of the block punt and the blown call, and to this day still get me. But I mean, if you look at it, I mean, I said this was one of those 2 seasons that the Giants from 1964 to 1980 had winning records. 1970, they finished 9-5. 1972, they finished 8-6. Other than that, they had 3 7-7 seasons, and everything else was they had a losing record. So this was one of those seasons. But that's it. I mean, it was kind of like a perfect storm. I mean, if we look at like their defense, right? They had Jim Files, who was their rookie, their first round pick, a very good middle linebacker. Their draft was horrible. Once again, as always, their drafts were absolutely horrible. I'll go over that in a little bit. But if you look at their defense, I mean, they had Fred Dreyer, who was a defensive end, who was a good pick. Unfortunately, he was their first round pick in 1969. Very good pick, very good player. However, he did not want to play in New York. He played 3 seasons for the Giants. 1971 was his last season, and then after that, he went out to he played for the Rams for the rest of his career. But I mean, if you look at the Giants, like on their defense, right? You got Fred Dreyer, you got Lurtzema, you got Jerry Shea. I believe his name was Jerry, but it's Shea. You got Jim Kinnicky, you got Ralph Heck, Matt Hazeltine, Jim Files. You got in the defensive secondary, you got Spider Lockhart, okay? But you got Parker, you got Eaton, you got Longo, you got Williams. I mean, we're not talking Hall of Famers here. I say if you look on the offense, nothing super duper special. They had Ron Johnson, right, who's a very good player. Bob Tucker was in his rookie season. Fran Tarkenton was a Hall of Famer, right? So they were able to put up some points. Also, it was a very special season because Ron Johnson and Tucker Fredrickson were healthy and they played together all year long. Tucker Fredrickson was a decent running back. He was a very good receiver, good blocker, good receiver, but he got injured a lot. 1971 was his last season. His injuries just caught up to him. He after 71, he was done. Ron Johnson, he got injured a bunch. In 1971, Ron Johnson only played in 2 games because of injuries. But 1970, Bob Tucker's rookie season, he played the whole season. He did very, very well. Ron Johnson, he gained over 1,000 yards rushing. Tucker Fredrickson played, I'm not sure if he played all the games, but I guess I can kind of find that out. But he played let's see. He played in all 14 games. Yep. Clifton McNeil was a decent, he had 50 receptions. Bob Tucker played in all 14. Don Herman, he played in 13. He was a rookie in 69. But they had a lot of guys that played that they were relatively healthy. They didn't really have many injuries. So it was kind of like a perfect storm, how they, they kind of like overachieved. They had a mediocre team. But they wound up, I said 9-4 because they played a lot of weaker opponents. So it was kind of I said, like a kind of perfect storm. I mean, the Giants scored 11 touchdowns running the ball. They gave up 11 touchdowns running the ball. Passing, the Giants threw for 19 touchdown passes. They gave up 19 touchdown passes. They just, Pete Gogolak had a nice year. He kicked 25 field goals. He had 41 attempts. So he was only kicked at 61%, but back then that was pretty good. But he kicked 25 field goals, which was pretty gone good. He kicked 32 out of 32 on the extra points. The Giants had 35 sacks on their defense. They gave up 37. Just very mediocre. So for them to wind up being actually 9-5 at the end of the season, with the team that they had was, actually pretty remarkable. I mean, it was just kind of like a perfect storm kind of thing. As I said, the thing that just gets me is the blown call against the Saints, the block punt against the Saints, which directly gave the Saints 7 points. The Giants lost 14-10 that one. It was just now. If we look at the Giants draft, Jim Files was their first round pick. He was a good middle linebacker from Oklahoma. They took him at pick number 13. The problem is that he played 4 seasons for the Giants, and he wound up becoming a priest or a minister. So he played 4 years for the Giants, and that was it. His career was over. He said after 1972, or during the 72 season, the Giants were a pretty decent team. And he said there was, after they wound up 8-6 and they missed the playoffs. And he said there was some guys were bickering and arguing and stuff like in the locker room and complaining and stuff like that. And he really didn't seem to like that too much. So he kind of lost interest. So what happened was in 1973, he, what's up, Teddy? Rams house. But in 1973, Jim Files was playing, and he said his heart wasn't really into it, and the Giants had a horrible season in 73. So Jim Files, their first-round pick, just retired. He stopped playing. He never played. He played 4 years, and that was it. The Giants' second-round pick, Wes Grant, he didn't play for the Giants. They took Dwayne Miller in the 6th round. Their second and third round picks they didn't have. They didn't have a 7th or 8th round pick. The only other pick really, let's see, really was Pat Hughes. He was he wound up becoming a linebacker for the Giants. He was an all right linebacker, but he played 7 seasons for the Giants. He played from 1970 to 1976. He finished his career off. He played a few more seasons, 2 or 3 more seasons with the New Orleans Saints. So he was a decent linebacker. But other than that, there was 17 rounds. Once again, the Giants really didn't have any impactful players. I said Jim Files was their starting middle linebacker, but he played 4 years, and that was it. His career was over. So once again, the Giants had to do some trading like they did in the offseason. They traded Homer Jones away to get Juwan Johnson in there. And I said that they were relatively healthy during the 1970 season. And, so that was another one of the things that really, really helped them. Let's see here. I'll just read this. This is in Wikipedia. The 1970 New York Giants season was the franchise 46th season in the National Football League. This was the first season for the Giants after the AFL-NFL merger in which 10 American Football League teams joined the National Football League. The team was led by second-year head coach Alex Webster, who took over in 1969. The Giants finished 9-5 for their first winning season in 7 years since 1963. But they missed the playoffs by losing their season finale against the Los Angeles Rams at home in Yankee Stadium by a score of 31-3. The Giants finished second in the NFC East, a game behind the Dallas Cowboys. They were also only one game out of a wild card spot won by the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions won the wild card spot with a record of 10-4. Giants were 9-5. So the Giants missed winning the division by 1 game, and they missed going to the playoffs by way of wild card by 1 game. Probably more damaging to the Giants' playoffs hopes than the loss to the Rams were the 2 devastating losses to 2 of the NFL's worst teams. Now, when they lost to the Eagles won 3 games all season. The Eagles started 0-7. The last 7 games of the season, they were actually 3-4. So they were very competitive, their last 7 games of the season. So when the Giants lost to them on Monday night was the second half of the season when the Eagles were competitive. So they go, the first was 2 of the devastating losses. The first one was the 14-10 loss at New Orleans in week 3. The Giants were the victims of a blown call by head linesman Bruce Finlayson, I guess, who ruled tight end Aaron Thomas to be out of bounds on what had been a game-winning touchdown pass from Fran Tarkin in the closing minutes. Replays showed Thomas had both feet down in bounds with control of the ball. And as you see, if you ever see the YouTube video, you see the ref just going like this. He was in bounds. I don't know, unbelievable. Horrible, horrible call. Cost the Giants a playoff spot. Really did. The Saints' only other win in 1970 came 5 weeks later when Tom Dempsey kicked a then-record NFL record 63-yard field goal for a 19-7 win over the Detroit Lions. Ironically, the team that beat out the Giants for the final playoff spot in the NFC East was the Lions, and they wound up losing to the Saints. So those are only 2 games that the Saints won all year by a blown call by the referee and by a 63-yard field goal from Tom Dempsey as time expired. Those are the only 2 games the Saints won all year. They were not a very good team, and unfortunately, the Giants played down to the level of the competition, and it cost them. The second loss was the 23-20 setback at Philadelphia on Monday Night Football in Week 10. The Giants' only setback in a 10-week stretch. Their only loss was the Monday night game. They were 9-1 in a 10-week period. The only loss was the Monday night game. The game at Franklin Field was more memorable for the antics in the broadcast booth when Howard Cosell vomited on Dandy Don Meredith's Cowboy booze. Cosell took a taxi back to the hotel at halftime, leaving Meredith to finish the game with Keith Jackson. Says the Saints finished with the NFL's second worst record of 2-11-1. The Giants beat the NFL's worst team of 1970 was the 2-12 Boston Patriots. So the Giants played, what I'm saying? So the Giants played the worst team, the Boston Patriots. They played the second worst team, the New Orleans Saints, who had 2 wins. They played 2 games against the Eagles, who were 3-10-1. Right? They said they beat the Buffalo Bills, who had like 3 wins. They beat the New York Jets, who had 4 wins. So, for them to get there right, it was also kind of a perfect storm as well, too. The Giants also lost at home to the 6-8 Chicago Bears, right? This was the closest the Giants came to qualifying for the playoffs in the 70s. The franchise enjoyed only one other winning season in the decade, going 8-6 in 1972. Big Blue did not return to the playoffs until 1981, ending a drought which dated back to the 1963 championship game. Yeah, so, I mean, as I said, once again, just a mediocre team, and kind of the perfect kind of storm. They first game of the season, they lost to the Bears 24-16. Once again, a special teams play was proved costly. The Giants, I think, were up 10-0, and they had the guy ran for the Bears, ran the kickoff back. It was like 100 yards or so for a touchdown. And the Giants threw a bunch of interceptions. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. The Giants were up 3-0. Then Cecil Turner returned a kickoff 95 yards back for a touchdown to put the Bears up 7-3. So the Giants were winning 13-10 at halftime. And the Bears scored 2 touchdowns in the second half, and the Giants scored a field goal, and that was it. But the Giants were winning in that game. The Giants actually were winning in all 3 of their first games, and they lost them all. So the Giants lost 24-16 to the Chicago Bears on Saturday night at Yankee Stadium. Second game of the season, the Giants went to Dallas. They were winning 10-0, I do believe. And they wound up losing 28-10 to the Cowboys, right? Yeah, 10-0. Actually, the Giants were winning 10-0 at halftime. And they wound up losing 28-10. It all fell apart in the second half for the Giants. Let's see here. Then week 3, they lost in New Orleans 14-10. Then their first win of the season came that following week. In week 4, they played the Eagles at home. They won 30-23. With like about a minute or 2 to go in the game, the Giants were just moving the ball, trying to get into maybe field goal range when Fran Tarkenton handed the ball off to Ron Johnson, and he ran 34 yards for the game-winning score. So that was a very exciting game because it was tied 23-23. All right, so then that was the Giants' first win. So now they're 1-4. So then they traveled to Boston to play the Patriots, where they won 16-0. Now they're 2-3. Then the St. Louis Cardinals came to town at Yankee Stadium on Sunday, October 25th. In the 6th game of the season, the Giants would win 35-17. Fran Tarkenton completed, he threw 5 touchdown passes. He completed like 12 passes, was it? What did he complete? Did he throw 16? Fran Tarkenton completed 15 passes, 5 on 1 for touchdowns. So now the Giants, after they beat the Cardinals, were now 3-3. The following week, the Giants went on the road, so to speak, to play the Jets in Shea Stadium without Joe Namath. The Giants won because they had the backup quarterback in. The Giants won 22-10. Now the Giants are 4-3. The following week, the Cowboys come to town. Cowboys were winning. What were they winning? 20, was it 20? The Cowboys were winning 20-9. Giants scored 2 touchdowns to put them ahead. And so the Giants wind up winning 23-20. Exciting game, exciting finish. So the Giants now are 5-3. Then the following week, the Washington Redskins come to town in the Yankee Stadium on Sunday, November 15th. The Redskins were up 33-14 going into the fourth quarter. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Ron Johnson ran in from about 7 or 8 yards out with about a minute to go in the game, put the Giants up 35-33. The place was going freaking bananas, and the Giants wind up prevailing 35-33. Great game. So now the Giants are 6-3. Then came the Monday night game. The Giants go on the road in Franklin Field Monday night, November 23rd, the first Monday night game the Giants ever played. They lost to the Eagles 23-20. Then one of them was that botched punt. The snap was high. Bill Johnson, he played only 11 games in his whole career as a punter. That was it. The snap was high. He jumped up. I think he fumbled the ball. He picked the ball up, and as he picked the ball up, somebody knocked the ball out of his hands. It was a mad scramble for it. The Eagles got it at the 2. 2 plays later, Norm Snead, who oddly enough 2 years later wound up getting traded to the Giants when the Giants traded Fran Tarkenton back to the Vikings. But Norm Snead snuck it in from like a yard out. And so it gave the Eagles 6 points there on a botched snap on a punt, and the Giants wound up losing by 3 points. So did that botched snap cost them a playoff spot? Maybe. So now the Giants are 6-4. So now the playoff hopes are kind of fading, but they got to keep winning. So then the Giants go on the road and they play the Redskins in Washington. Another tough game on Sunday, November 29th. In Washington, the Giants win 27-24. Now the Giants are 7-4. Following week, the Buffalo Bills, who only won 3 games all year, come to Yankee Stadium. So on Sunday, December 6th, the Giants would beat the Buffalo Bills 20-6. Actually, it was 6-6 at halftime. The Giants would wind up winning. So now the Giants are 8-4. Then the game first game I ever remember watching on TV, okay, it was the week 13, Sunday, December 13th. So I was at my grandparents' house, Sunday, December 13th. Actually, it was in Franklin Square. The Giants won 34-17. They beat the Cardinals. So now the Giants are 9-4. The only thing stopping them from making to the playoffs was the final game of the season, Sunday, December 20th. George Allen and his Los Angeles Rams came into the Yankee Stadium. The Giants were up 3-0. And then after that, all heck broke loose. And Giants had 2 turnovers, which cost them dearly. The Rams punter, Pat Studstill, he was a punter and a wide receiver. He had 2 touchdown passes, 2 touchdown receptions. I'm sorry. It's just absolutely horrible. The Giants wound up losing 31-3. So they finished 9-5. As I said, they still had a chance of making the playoffs, but the Cowboys would have had to have lost to the Houston Oilers. What were the Houston? Houston was horrible that year as well too. They didn't have too many wins either. Were they? They were 3-10-1. So, but the Cowboys wound up beating the Houston Oilers in the Cotton Bowl 52-10. So the Cowboys wound up with a record of 10-4. The Giants were in second place with a record of 9-5. As I said, the Giants could have maybe made the wild card, but the Detroit Lions finished with a record of 10-4. So just was not meant to be. But it was kind of like as I said, kind of like a perfect storm. The Giants were kind of a mediocre team. They gave up about as many points as they scored. They just played a lot of weak teams, and they took advantage of that, and they had to wind up with a very good record. They didn't have a lot of injuries that really depleted their roster. Everybody stayed relatively healthy, so it was just tough. But let me go over the playoffs and all that stuff and everything here. So In the NFC, this is one of my favorite games of all time. The Cowboys in the divisional round, right? Cowboys hosted the Detroit Lions. The Dallas won 5-0. They won like a baseball score, 5-0. The Cowboys won. Then the following day in Minnesota, the 49ers beat Minnesota 17-14. So that set up the NFC Championship game between the Cowboys and the 49ers. This is where this game here, this championship game, this is where it starts that long feud between the Cowboys and the 49ers in the playoffs. They played each other a ton of times. All started in 1970. They played each other 3 times in a row. 1970 and 1971 were the NFC Championship games. Cowboys won both times. The 1972 the playoffs, they faced each other. The Cowboys won that one too. So over in the AFC, the Oakland Raiders beat the Miami Dolphins 21-14. And then the Baltimore Colts wound up beating the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals started 1-6. They still won their division because they won their final 7 games of the season to finish with a record of 8-6. So they started 1-6, and not only they made the playoffs, they won their division, starting at 1-6. But the Baltimore Colts beat the Cincinnati Bengals 17-0. So it said the AFC Championship game was the Baltimore Colts and the Oakland Raiders. The Baltimore Colts won 27-17. And in the NFC game, the Dallas Cowboys, the championship game, the Dallas Cowboys beat the San Francisco 49ers 17-10. So the Baltimore Colts and the Dallas Cowboys went to the Super Bowl. Now it was called like kind of like the Blunder Bowl. I mean, it was just this game is often referred to as the Blunder Bowl, the Blooper Bowl, or their Stupor Bowl, due to it being marred with poor play, a blocked PAT, missed opportunities, penalties, turnovers, and officiating miscues. The two teams combined for a Super Bowl record 11 turnovers, with 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter. The Colts' 7 turnovers remain the most committed by a Super Bowl champion. Dallas also set a Super Bowl record with 10 penalties, costing them 133 yards. It was finally settled when the Colts rookie kicker Jim O'Brien made a 32-yard field goal with 5 seconds left in regulation time. Then a Super Bowl record for least time in the lead for a champion. Baltimore overcame a 13-6 deficit after 3 quarters and the loss of its starting quarterback, Johnny Unitas, to an injury. I think he broke his ribs or cracked some ribs or so. To date, the game is the only Super Bowl in which the Most Valuable Player award was given to a member of the losing team. Chuck Howley intercepted 2 passes. I know one of them was in the end zone. So actually, it was like a double dipper there. It was awarded to Chuck Howley of the losing team, and it was to Chuck Howley, a defensive player. Usually it's an offensive player. This time it was a defensive player on a losing team. The first non-quarterback to win the award, the Most Valuable Player, after making 2 interceptions. So, due to its blunders, the game is also regarded among the worst Super Bowls ever played, but is also recognized as the title the Colts needed to win after they lost Super Bowl III to the Jets. But it was also the first Super Bowl of the AFL-NFL merger. And it came right down to it where it was tied 13-13, the Super Bowl. And about a minute, so maybe a little over a minute to go in the game, Craig Morton, who actually was going to be the Giants quarterback a few years later, rolled out to his right, saw Dan Reeves, right, who's kind of open, who's going to become the Giants head coach in 1993 for 4 seasons. Craig Morton throws the ball. It was a little high, bounced off of Reeves' hands. Mike Curtis, the future Hall of Fame linebacker for the Colts, was there. It went right into his hand. He caught the ball. He got like 5, 6, 7 yards, whatever it was, and he got tackled. Well, that wound up setting up the game-winning field goal. So it was a turnover that set up the game-winning field goal by Jim O'Brien. 32-yard field goal. So as time expired, to give them the Colts a 16-13 win in the Super Bowl. So it was exciting. The end was exciting, but I remember watching that. I was pulling for the Colts because I was kind of pissed off at the Cowboys because they won the division and all. So I was pulling for the Colts, and it was just a lot of just really bad play. I mean, the Cowboys fumbled the ball. I think it was Calvin Hill or Dwayne Thomas, one of those two. They got inside like the 1 yard line of the Colts and they fumbled the ball, blew a drive. I mean, it just. One turnover after the other. It was a hard game. I mean, I was only 6 years old at the time, so I can't say it was a hard game to watch. But I remember it was just after it was over and reading about it all and all the turnovers and everything. It was just not a well played game at all. But the Colts wound up prevailing 16-13. So, but that pretty much wrapped up the 1970 season for the Giants. I said it's one that's always be near and dear to my heart. It's always going to rip my heart out every time I think about the 1970 season. The final loss of the season to the Rams. The Giants were to win. They were in the playoffs. And it goes to show you just on any given Sunday because the Giants lost at home to the Rams, 31-3. Well, earlier in the season, the Jets, who only won 4 games all year, went into Los Angeles with a backup quarterback, and they beat the Rams like 31-20 or something like that. I could check the score, but yeah, it's like on any given Sunday. So a team with a losing record went into Los Angeles with a backup quarterback and put up over 30 points against the Rams. Meanwhile, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, Fran Tarkenton, at home in a game the Giants really needed to win, could only score 3 points. Go figure. Any given Sunday. As I said, it was kind of like, as I said, it was a good season. I mean, for the Giants, obviously after that you had things to look forward to, But I mean, I said it was kind of a perfect storm. They played a weak schedule. A lot of opponents had losing records. A lot of them had bad records. The Giants wound up winning a lot of those games. But in the end, it was just, the blown call and there's a few bad special teams plays quite possibly cost the Giants a chance to go to the playoffs. The 1970 season, Giants finished 9-5, 1 game out of the playoffs. Well, that pretty much, as I said, wraps up the 1970 season for the New York Giants. I'll be back again tomorrow with the 1971 season for the New York Giants, which just happened to be the 47th season in the history of the New York Giants. I'll see you then.